Most people think the hardest part of running a marathon is the running. But as someone who ran a marathon, for me, it actually wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part for me was just getting to the finish line healthy. So let's talk about what I'm switching from my marathon training 1 to marathon training 2. Let's get into it. So just to recap my first marathon, I ran this May 3rd, and on the day I'm recording this, I think it's August 4th, 5th, somewhere around there. So it's been a few months, and originally I trained for 6 weeks, and I did go into that kind of starting with an injury. My goal was to get sub 4 hours. I ended up getting 4 hours and 56 minutes, which I will say I dealt with a few injuries, honestly, throughout the race. Quickly, my Achilles basically gave out, and it got to the point where I was like, couldn't really jog for more than like 30 seconds without jumping in pain. I dealt with some cramping, and those were the two main injuries I dealt with. But overall, that's kind of how the first marathon went. I finished, which is an accomplishment in itself, but didn't really go ideal. So let's talk about what I'm switching from my first training block to my second training block. So the first thing is, for the first one, my whole premise, and I did like a whole YouTube video series on this, was I just wanted to see if you could like go get yourself to get like a really impressive marathon training time with only 6 weeks training. I originally was gonna do 4 weeks training. I ended up deciding to do 6. But the whole premise basically was to see how well I could do with very short training. So I knew that I was somewhat under training, but for this one, I'm only ended up changing it to a 9-week block. So the original one was 6 weeks, this one's 9 weeks, but I am doing like a 2.5-week kind of ramp up now, just to get myself ready for the weekly mileage that I will be doing, which I will talk about that later. So that's going to be one major change, is adding those 3 true training block weeks with those a few additional ones. It'll just give my body more time to absolutely like adjust to the mileage, because that's one thing that you don't really think about, that your body's just not ready for increasing its mileage so dramatically, which is also why during the second training prep, I'm now able to increase my weekly mileage in smaller amounts. I don't have my exact training plan anymore for the first one, but I remember it pretty well. I think I was increasing by like 5 to probably 7 miles each week, which I just think that was a little aggressive. Whereas this one, I can really increase by probably like 3 miles each week-ish. It's gonna be around what I'm aiming for, and go from there. The next one is I'm actually decreasing the number of runs I'm doing, which obviously to a lot of people that probably sound very odd, that I didn't do as well as I wanted in my first marathon, so I'm running less for the second one. But as I said, what actually failed me in my first marathon was my body being able to physically hold up with the race. It wasn't actually being able to keep up the intensity, it was just my body gave out. So that's why my thought process here is, if I decrease the weekly total number of runs, and later you'll hear about another change I'm making that kind of coincides with this, but that should allow my body to be healthier and stronger going into the actual marathon day. Because one thing I will say, going back to how the first marathon went, was the first 12 miles, I was exactly on pace for where I needed to be. Then my Achilles started hurting, and then by mile 14, it had kind of given out. So I truly, firmly believe that if I had been able to not have my Achilles give out, that I would have been able to achieve my goal of sub 4 hours. So that's why getting to it healthy is very important. And now that other thing I was talking about is decreasing my total weekly mileage. Like I said, I don't have my exact plan anymore, but just remembering it, I believe I was doing somewhere between 40 to 45 miles pretty much every week. Obviously, in some of the earlier weeks, I wasn't doing that many miles, but obviously once it ramped up towards peak week and everything, I was probably doing 40, 45 miles a week for weeks like 3 and 4, which were my peak weeks. But this time around, I believe my peak week even is like 32 to 35 miles. I'm keeping it much lower, but also my total miles for training probably won't be that far off, because I'm adding those additional weeks of training, though I will be doing a lower mileage. And like I said, I'm also doing less runs. So during the other one, yes, I had more runs during the week, but some of them weren't crazy long. Where this one, I have my short run, I have like an intermediate run, and then a long run. And the three of those typically, once I'm like really getting into it, are going to add up to around 32 miles a week. That's kind of where I think a good sweet spot's going to be for me. Obviously, if you know anything about running training, obviously the first couple weeks aren't going to be that. The first week, I believe, is like 19 or 20 miles, and then you start increasing from there to get to those peak weeks. That'll be like 32, and maybe one of them goes a little higher than 32. Max, I can imagine, if I remember correctly, is 35. But the whole point is decreasing that total mileage, and a lot of the things you'll see for this is a lot of it has to do with analyzing how my race went. So like for me, like I've been like emphasizing heavily, it was injuries that kind of held me back. So I want to make sure I get to the race in good shape rather than just getting there like I did last time where I wasn't really at 100%, clearly because my body gave out so quickly. And I dealt with a lot of injuries in training last time. So my hope is to try and not have as many injuries while actually training. So the next change I actually made was I did actually increase the pace of my runs, because I honestly last time, like I always felt on all of my runs like I was holding back. Like I was like, I just know, like I think I can easily at a conversational pace go faster than this. So it was probably somewhere in the range of like 15 to 25 seconds. I increased all of my paces by. So what do I mean by that is my regular run pace, my marathon pace, I'm actually going to be training like 10, I believe it's like 10 to 15 seconds faster than what my marathon pace needs to be for race day. My easy runs in my first training block were anywhere for 10 minutes to 10 minutes and 30 seconds per mile. Now I've pushed it up to a 9:45 to 10:15 per mile. And anything, if you watch any of my running videos, I always tend to like push towards the front end of that pace. If it says 9:45 to 10:15, barring there's a reason, I'm likely going to be somewhere around that 9:45. I just like to push the pace. I enjoy it. So all of my paces are actually going to be pushed up, which I think will improve my cardio so that it should be easier, if anything, to keep up at that pace. Because I want race day to feel almost kind of easy. That's just kind of who I am. So the next thing is I am heavily building in that on my leg days are going to be, and I'm still in the process of fully creating this like perfect leg day, but I want it to truly be the perfect leg day to keep my leg strength, because lifting is a very big part of like who I am in this channel. But I also want to strengthen my knees, my Achilles specifically. Those are two things that bothered me and irritated me throughout my last training block. So I want to really try and build up the strength in those areas so that there can't be things that let me down on race day. And then also just strengthening all aspects of my lower body in ways that will effectively set me up to run this marathon. Because honestly, like especially with something like a marathon where you're going to be just going for hours on end, your weak points are going to be found. Like you're doing the same repetitive motion for hours. Whatever weak points you have are going to show up on race day. So if I can adequately kind of strengthen, stretch out, and just perfect my lower body in the next, at this point it's probably about 10 weeks, 10 and a half weeks, then I think that'll allow me to have a better race so I can actually achieve that sub 4-hour goal, because that is going to be the goal again. So that, I'm still in the process of curating it, but like I said, obviously I'm going to have some strength-based exercises, but I really do foresee like a good half hour, 40 minutes of my leg day is just going to be exercises to strengthen like much smaller things. It's not going to be like doing a leg press or something, or like a squat. It's going to be much more specific exercises that'll strengthen much smaller parts of the body. But I really think the compounding effect of all of that will be extremely beneficial on race day. The next thing is there are some things that I'm still considering. So one of them is nutrition and fueling. I did like my fueling pace using Goose for the last marathon I ran. I did enjoy that. But nutrition-wise, I did cramp a little bit at points during the race. So I think I'm going to look into my pre-marathon meal and like maybe what I could bring along with me. I'm not exactly sure about this, as you can kind of tell. But I want to figure out what I can eat and how I can prepare myself better for the race so that I don't cramp. Because at the end of the race, which at this point I already knew I was not getting sub 4 hours. This was like the last probably 3 miles. But there was a point where I was trying to run, but every time I kind of started jogging a little bit, my calf started cramping. So I want to try and figure out ways that that doesn't happen during my next race, because it'll be great if I can make it 22 miles exactly on pace. But if I start cramping, like, I'm not going to be able to hit that sub 4 hour mark. So I do need to figure out that aspect of the nutrition. One thing is the shoe rotation. I am pretty much certain that I have one pair of shoes that I'm training in right now, and I know with running shoes, from the research I've done, you should typically wear them for 300 to 500 miles in the shoe. I know one of my shoes right now is somewhere, I think my goal was to get them to about 425, 450 miles. And I started the count at 300. I'm at 37. So I have about another 80, 90 miles in it. So those will probably hit the first few weeks of training. And then I'm going to get rid of them and then really start breaking in the other pair of shoes I have that probably have like 50, 75 miles in them. So those are pretty new. So that's one thing that I'm not really considering that. That's just a change I'm going to be making, which those shoes are actually the ones that I wore on last race day. The next one is just recovery in general. I want to look in and see what I can do possibly, because maybe if I were recovering more effectively, then I wouldn't have had so many injuries. But like I said, I'm not really too sure about that. And the last one is I did use KT tape a solid amount during the last marathon training and prep and everything. But I want to see if I can try and like mitigate my use of KT tape, but then only use it right towards like peak week and maybe and marathon day for sure. Maybe peak week, but it's more specifically marathon day, to try and mitigate the risk of me having any of these injuries on race day, because I did notice that it helped a lot, but I'd rather have it as something that's supplemental and additional rather than something I was like relying on, because I was honestly pretty reliant on it during my first marathon training. So obviously, like I said, the goal is still the same thing I had from the first marathon, which is a sub 4 hour marathon. But as you can see, I'm changing quite a lot in my training block. So I guess all we can do from here is you can keep tuning in for the next 9 weeks, and we'll see what was working, what isn't working, and whatever I have to adapt on the fly. So that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you next Sunday at 5 p.m. Catch you there.